When the clock struck 6 o'clock on the evening of that wedding Sunday, my face was still burning from the slap my daughter-in-law had given me in front of all the guests. "This is what you get for being so selfish," she screamed, adjusting the $30,000 wedding dress that I, in secret, had financed. What she didn't know was that I held a secret that would forever destroy her perfect life built on lies. But before I continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and write in the comments. Where are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories travel. My name is Eleanor Covington, and for 40 years, I lived a calculated lie. At 67 years old, I drive a car that's nearly a decade old. I buy my clothes on sale, and I work part-time at a small neighborhood bookstore. To anyone watching, I am just a middle-class widow trying to make ends meet. This carefully cultivated image was my shield, my armor against a world that, as I learned from my late husband, Edward, treats those who display wealth differently. "The quietest fortune is the most powerful," Edward used to tell me as we discreetly built our real estate empire. When he passed away 5 years ago, he left me an estate that few could imagine: 4 commercial buildings in downtown, a diversified investment portfolio, and bank accounts in 3 different countries. Everything was managed with perfect discretion by Gregory, our financial advisor and the only confidant in this game of appearances. The strategy of living modestly worked perfectly until the day my son, Michael, brought Brittany home to meet me. I remember her walking into my apartment, her eyes scanning every corner as if she were evaluating a property for sale, not the home of her future mother-in-law. "How cozy," she commented, her lips slightly pursed as she noted my faded curtains and simple furniture. The condescending tone didn't escape me, nor did the look she exchanged with Michael, a glance that seemed to say, "See? It's exactly like I told you." During dinner, she barely touched the food I prepared, claiming to be watching her figure. Her questions, however, were voracious when the topic turned to my financial situation. "And how do you manage on just your pension, Eleanor? It must be so hard to get by in this neighborhood with so little," she inquired, fiddling distractedly with her gold bracelet. I responded vaguely about managing what little I have, watching as her eyes lit up while scanning my apartment. What she was really calculating, I realized then, was not my supposed poverty, but the value of the property located in one of the most sought-after areas of the city. Her visits became more frequent in the following weeks. Each one brought a new comment about how I deserved more comfort, or how it would be easier for me to live in a smaller place. The suggestions soon transformed into a coordinated campaign when Michael began repeating the same arguments. "Mom, Brittany, and I are worried. What if you fall and no one finds you for days? These retirement apartments have emergency buttons in every room." The first crack in my mask appeared when, returning from the bathroom during one visit, I overheard Brittany on the phone in the kitchen. "Yes, Mom, her apartment is in a perfect area. If we can get her to move, we can stay here while we look for something to buy. She's so naive, she'll probably think we're doing her a favor." I froze in the hallway, feeling the blood boil in my veins. In that moment, I decided I would maintain the charade a while longer, not to protect my privacy, but to understand just how far her greed would go. My investigation began the next day. A call to Gregory revealed what I feared. Michael was drowning in debt. Maxed-out credit cards, personal loans to keep up appearances, late payments on the luxury car he drove. The extravagant wedding they were planning was being financed with even more credit, creating a financial time bomb. The most painful blow came when Gregory showed me records of inquiries Michael had made to law firms specializing in elder conservatorship. My own son was actively looking for legal ways to declare me incapable of managing my own assets. That night, alone in my apartment, I cried for the first time in years. Not for the betrayal I had already sensed that, but for the final death of the illusions I had held about my only son. The boy I had raised with values of honesty and hard work had become a predator, willing to devour his own mother for greed. For 3 months, I continued the charade. I pretended to consider the housing options they brought me. I examined brochures for retirement homes. I listened patiently to their increasingly aggressive arguments. In parallel, I carefully documented every conversation, every message, every attempt at manipulation. The situation came to a head 2 weeks before the wedding, when I was ambushed in my own living room. Brittany showed up with her parents and Michael for what they called an important conversation about your future. Eleanor, Brittany's mother began, a woman with an artificial smile and calculating eyes. It's time you thought about what's best for everyone. At your age, living alone is dangerous. And Carol, her father added, not hiding his interest in the dimensions of my apartment, with the sale of this place, you'd have money for an excellent retirement home and still have plenty left over to help Michael and Brittany start their lives. There it was, finally, the raw, naked truth. It wasn't about my well-being. It was about turning my home into cash to fund their unsustainable lifestyle. And if I refuse? I asked, watching the discomfort spread across the room. Michael cleared his throat, avoiding my gaze. Mom, we hope it doesn't come to that. More formal measures. But if your mental health is compromising your decision-making ability, the implicit threat hung in the air like poison. If I didn't cooperate voluntarily, they would seek legal means to declare me incompetent. They had laid the groundwork, planting seeds of doubt about my sanity among neighbors and acquaintances. That night, after they left, I made a decision that would change everything. I called Gregory and asked him to prepare all the necessary documents for a full disclosure of my true financial situation. It was time to show them who Eleanor Covington really was. What they didn't know, as they planned to take over my little old lady apartment, was that I had silently paid off half their debts over the past 2 years, subsidized the miraculously cheap rent of the apartment where they lived, and secretly guaranteed the payment for the wedding reception hall. The truth was about to come out, and it would be far more painful than any of them could imagine. The days leading up to the wedding were a choreography of rising tension. Every visit from Michael and Brittany brought new pressures, new arguments, new attempts to make me feel incapable and dependent. Eleanor, we found a wonderful place for people your age, Brittany would say, with that false sweetness I had learned to recognize. It has 24-hour medical assistance, social activities. You wouldn't be so lonely. What she really meant was, you wouldn't be so in the way of our ambition. On the eve of the wedding, Michael made his final attempt. He showed up at my apartment alone, which was rare in recent months. Brittany seemed to monitor every interaction between us. Mom, he began, sitting on the couch where he used to watch cartoons as a child. Tomorrow is the most important day of my life. Please, don't make it complicated by being difficult. Difficult. The word echoed in my mind like an insult. Defending my autonomy, my dignity, my right to choose where and how to live had become being difficult. I looked at my son, searching that 34-year-old face for any trace of the boy I had raised. I found nothing but a calculating stranger, shaped by the ambition of a woman who saw him as a means to an end. Michael, I responded calmly, do you remember what your father always said about dignity? He looked away, uncomfortable. Edward had been a man of unwavering principles who valued integrity above all else. I will be at your wedding tomorrow, as I promised. As for the rest, we'll have time to discuss it later. He left frustrated, not realizing that would be the last time he would enter my apartment as the son I thought I knew. I couldn't sleep that night. I tossed and turned, mentally reviewing every document Gregory had prepared, every piece of evidence we had gathered, every revelation that was about to unfold. As much as I tried to convince myself I was doing what was necessary, my mother's heart bled for the impending rupture. At 5 o'clock in the morning, I got up and prepared myself with meticulous care. I chose a simple but elegant dress, one I knew Brittany would consider cheap and outdated. I put on my thin-rimmed glasses. The ones Michael once commented made me look like a retired librarian. Every choice was deliberate, a final performance of the person I had cultivated for decades. The wedding was an obscene display of debt-fueled opulence. Imported flowers decorated every table, crystal glasses gleamed under strategic lighting, and an orchestra played while guests in designer clothes gossiped about how much it all must have cost. I sat in the front row, as tradition demanded, feeling the pitying and condescending stares from Brittany's family. How wonderful that you could make it, Eleanor. A great aunt of Brittany's commented during the reception. It must be difficult to get around at your age. I smiled politely, knowing the woman was probably only 7 years younger than me. It was at the bar, while ordering a club soda with lime, that the inevitable confrontation began. Brittany approached in her extravagant wedding gown, flanked by 2 bridesmaids. Eleanor, she said with that false sweetness I had come to recognize. Michael and I were thinking of stopping by your place tomorrow to pick up the keys. That way you'll have time to pack your essentials before the move. I looked at her, studying her perfectly made-up face, her calculating eyes, her smile that hid pure opportunism. What move would that be, Brittany? She laughed, a metallic sound that drew curious glances. Come on, Eleanor, we don't need to pretend. We've already decided it's best for everyone if you move to a more suitable place. The facility we found is perfect, and Michael and I can stay in your apartment temporarily while we look for something bigger. The bridesmaids discreetly moved away, sensing the rising tension. I don't recall agreeing to that, I replied with a calmness that surprised even me. Her smile faltered for a moment. Eleanor, please, let's not make a scene. This is my special day. We just need the keys. The rest can be sorted out later. The audacity of that woman was almost admirable in its purity. She truly believed that all it took was a snap of her fingers for me to hand over everything I had worked for over decades. I am not giving you the keys to my apartment, Brittany, I said firmly. Not tomorrow, not ever. Her face contorted into an expression that turned her beauty into something ugly and venomous. You don't get it, you stubborn old woman, she hissed, low enough for only me to hear. It's not an option. You will give us those keys, or we will make you. There are ways of dealing with stubborn old people who don't know what's best for them. I held her gaze. Threats don't work on me, Brittany. I suggest you go back to your guests. Your husband is looking for you. Indeed, Michael was approaching, his face showing signs of concern as he saw us in a visibly tense conversation. Is everything all right here? He asked, wrapping a possessive arm around Brittany's waist. No, it's not, she replied, raising her voice enough to attract the attention of nearby guests. Your mother is being impossible. She's refusing to hand over the keys to the apartment. Michael looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, a mixture of frustration and cold calculation that made me realize how much he had changed. Mom, we already discussed this. It's for the best. Please, don't make things complicated. We discussed it? I don't remember agreeing to anything, Michael. It is my apartment, my home, and I have no intention of moving. More guests began to gather, sensing that something dramatic was about to happen. Brittany perceived the growing audience and decided to use it to her advantage. Eleanor, she said, deliberately raising her voice, you are embarrassing your son on his wedding day. We are only trying to help. A woman your age doesn't need so much space. My age? I repeated, feeling the anger swell. And what age would that be, Brittany? The age where I must give up my autonomy? The age where I must hand over everything I own because someone else has decided it's better for me? She took a step forward, her face inches from mine. It's the age where you need to stop being selfish and think about your family. Michael is your only son. You should want to help him. I have helped my son his entire life, Brittany. But that doesn't mean I will allow myself to be manipulated or intimidated, not by you or anyone else. That's when it happened. So fast I didn't have time to react. Her hand moved in a perfect arc, connecting with my cheek with a sharp crack that echoed in the now completely silent ballroom. My glasses flew off, falling to the polished floor and shattering under the stiletto heel of a nearby guest. The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved, no one spoke. It was as if time had frozen in that moment of public violence. This is what you get for being so selfish, Brittany screamed, breaking the silence, her voice ringing through the hall. A woman your age should know her place. My cheek burned, but the pain in my chest was infinitely worse. I bent down, trembling, to pick up my broken glasses. No one moved to help me. Some guests looked away, uncomfortable. Others whispered among themselves. But no one, absolutely no one, dared to defend the poor, elderly mother-in-law who had just been publicly humiliated. Michael stood frozen, staring at the floor as if I were invisible. His silence was more painful than any word he could have said. You are no longer welcome here, Brittany continued, smoothing her immaculate wedding dress. Michael and I need our privacy to start our new life. Your apartment will be perfect for us, while we look for something better. I rose slowly, feeling all eyes on me. Tears streamed down my face, but inside, something had transformed forever. That slap wasn't just a physical blow. It was the final confirmation that it was time to end this charade. I walked in silence toward the exit, the guests' whispers following me like a toxic cloud. "Poor thing, she seems so frail," Brittany's aunt whispered. "The bride is right. That lady can't take care of herself anymore," a distant cousin added. When I reached the parking garage, my decision was made. I pulled my phone from my purse and dialed Gregory's number. "I'm at the Grand Astoria Ballroom. Bring the documents now. All of them." The cool night air contrasted with the suffocating heat inside the reception hall. I sat in my car, my hands still shaking as I waited for Gregory. The last rays of the setting sun reflected off the windshield, creating an almost cinematic effect, a symbolic sunset for the life I had lived until then. Gregory arrived exactly 20 minutes later, his black BMW parking discreetly beside my modest car. He got out carrying a leather executive briefcase, his normally impassive face now showing signs of genuine concern. "Mrs. Covington," he said as he approached. "Are you all right? Your face is red." I touched my cheek instinctively, still feeling the sting of Brittany's slap. "I'm fine, Gregory. I just discovered that sometimes it takes a physical assault to finally see the whole truth," he nodded grimly. "I brought everything, as you asked. Are you sure you want to do this now? Once this starts, there's no turning back." I looked toward the ballroom across the parking lot. The flashing lights, the cheerful music, and the carefree laughter created a surreal contrast to the scene I had just witnessed. "I am absolutely sure," I replied, my voice firmer than it had been in months. "It's time for everyone to meet the real Eleanor Covington." As Gregory opened his briefcase and showed me the documents one by one, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. There were the complete records of my properties, 4 commercial buildings in Midtown Manhattan, valued at over $12 million. Bank statements showing diversified investments totaling another $8 million. Documents proving that I had been secretly paying 70% of the rent on the miraculously cheap apartment where Michael and Brittany lived. "The most important document is here," Gregory said, handing me a separate folder, the official notice of cancellation for the wedding's financial guarantee. I opened the folder and read the carefully worded terms. "Hereby, Eleanor Covington cancels, with immediate effect, the financial guarantee provided for the event held at the Grand Astoria Ballroom on today's date. The establishment's manager is authorized to collect directly from the bride and groom, Michael Covington and Brittany Miller, the full value of the event, estimated at $125,000. The magnitude of what I was about to do hit me like a wave. For 3 years, I had been the invisible safety net keeping Michael and Brittany's lives afloat. And now, in a single night, I was withdrawing all of that support. "Gregory," I said as I signed the document with renewed determination, "this isn't revenge, it's a consequence. For too long, I protected my son from the consequences of his choices, and that protection corrupted him into someone I no longer recognize." "I understand perfectly," he replied, his professionalism tempered by decades of experience with similar family dramas. "In 30 years as a financial advisor, I have seen many families destroyed by greed. What you are doing requires more courage than most people possess." Gathering all my inner strength, I walked back to the ballroom with Gregory at my side. Each step was deliberate, carrying the weight of the decision that would forever change the course of my family. The music stopped abruptly as we entered. 120 pairs of eyes turned toward us, some curious, others uncomfortable, recognizing the woman who had been publicly humiliated just minutes before. Brittany was the first to react, her face contorting in a mixture of surprise and irritation. "What are you doing here?" she yelled from the center of the dance floor, where she was posing for photographs with Michael. "Haven't you caused enough drama for one night?" Gregory stepped forward, his imposing presence silencing the growing murmurs. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced in a clear, authoritative voice, "I apologize for the interruption, but I have urgent legal matters to discuss with Mr. Michael Covington and Mrs. Brittany Miller." The silence that followed was so thick you could hear the hum of the air conditioning system. Some guests began to pull out their phones, sensing they were about to witness something extraordinary. Michael approached slowly, his face pale and his eyes confused. "Mom, what's going on? Who is this man?" "Michael," I replied in a surprisingly calm voice, "this is Gregory Hayes, my financial and legal advisor for 20 years. He has come to deliver some documents that I believe you and your wife will find illuminating. Gregory opened his briefcase and pulled out the first document. Mr. Michael Covington, you are hereby notified that the financial guarantee your mother provided for your apartment lease has been immediately canceled. Your landlord will be notified tomorrow, and you will have 30 days to find a new guarantor or vacate the property. The color drained completely from Michael's face. Financial guarantee? Mom, what is he talking about? But I could see from the trembling in his hands that a part of him already knew. For years, he had suspected his financial luck wasn't entirely natural. But he chose not to ask questions because the answers might be uncomfortable. Furthermore, Gregory continued relentlessly. The monthly transfers of $5,000 that your mother has been making to your personal accounts have been permanently suspended. This includes payments for credit cards, car insurance, and various other expenses you believed were being covered by other sources. Brittany let out a sharp sound that echoed through the hall. "This is impossible," she exclaimed, rushing toward us, her wedding dress dragging on the floor. "Michael doesn't have a rich mother. Look at how she lives. Look at her clothes, her car." Her hysteria was palpable, and several guests began to murmur among themselves with growing fascination at the unfolding drama. Finally, Gregory said, pulling the last document from his briefcase, "The guaranteed payment for this celebration has also been canceled. The ballroom management will be entitled to demand full payment of $125,000 before the guests can leave tonight." His words fell on the ballroom like a bomb. Some guests began to move nervously toward the exits, afraid of being prevented from leaving. The realization hit Michael like a physical blow. "You," he whispered, looking at me with eyes that couldn't fully process what he was hearing. "You were paying for everything this whole time?" "For 3 years, Michael," I confirmed, my voice surprisingly steady. 3 years during which I thought I was helping you through a difficult time. 3 years waiting for you to finally get back on your feet and become the man I raised. 3 years believing you would remember the values your father and I taught you." Brittany started pacing in circles, holding her head in growing desperation. "This can't be happening. This isn't real," she screamed, as guests watched her with a mixture of horror and morbid fascination. "You're a poor old woman. You work in a bookstore. You drive a 10-year-old car. Appearances can be deceiving," I replied, feeling decades of careful performance come to an end. "For years, I chose to live simply because my husband and I believed that ostentatious wealth attracts trouble. It turns out we were right, only the trouble came from where we least expected it." At that moment, the ballroom manager approached, visibly flustered and holding several papers. "Mrs. Covington, I've just received a notice of payment cancellation. The contract for this celebration is guaranteed until tomorrow morning. Can you please explain what is happening?" "Mr. Davies," I replied, recognizing him from the negotiations I made when I secretly arranged for the wedding payment. "The financial guarantee I provided for this event has been revoked due to extraordinary circumstances that came to light tonight." I gestured toward Michael and Brittany, who stood in the center of the room like statues of despair. "I see," Mr. Davies said, observing the scene with the expertise of someone who had managed social events for decades. "And who will be responsible for the payment now?" "The outstanding balance is $125,000, including the venue, catering, music, flowers, and photography services." Gregory intervened smoothly. "The terms of the original contract are clear, Mr. Davies. In the absence of the guarantor, the responsibility falls to the primary contracting parties, in this case, Mr. Davies and Mrs. Covington." A growing murmur swept through the hall as guests began to understand the magnitude of what was happening. Some were already leaving discreetly, avoiding what promised to be a disastrous end to the celebration. I looked at Michael and Brittany one last time. "You have my number," I said calmly. "When you're ready to have a real conversation about respect, values, and responsibility, when you have learned what it means to earn things for yourselves, when you can look me in the eye and offer a genuine apology for what you did tonight, then we can talk. But for that," I added, looking directly at them, "you will first have to find a way to resolve this situation on your own." With those words, I turned and walked toward the exit with Gregory at my side, leaving behind a ballroom in complete chaos. The murmur behind us quickly grew in volume, transforming into a commotion of alarmed and confused voices. When we reached the parking garage, I asked Gregory, "How long do you think it will take for them to fully understand what happened here today?" He smiled faintly as he opened my car door. "The initial understanding has already arrived, Mrs. Covington. The real understanding, the kind that comes with humility and genuine remorse that could take years, or it may never come." "Then we'll have to be prepared for both possibilities," I replied, feeling a tremendous weight lift from my shoulders for the first time in years. The days that followed the wedding brought a deafening silence to my apartment. My phone vibrated constantly with notifications of missed calls and unread messages. Michael had called 27 times in the first 48 hours, Brittany 9, her parents 4. I let every call go to voicemail, every message unread. I needed that time to process what had happened and what was to come. On the morning of the third day, Margaret, my 70-year-old neighbor and only true friend in the building, showed up with coffee and fresh bagels. "The videos are everywhere," she said as she set the table for our impromptu breakfast. "Everyone's talking about the secret millionaire mother-in-law's revenge." I couldn't help a bitter laugh. "So now I'm an internet meme?" Margaret showed me her tablet, where several videos of the confrontation at the ballroom were accumulating millions of views. The comments ranged from shock to admiration, with many sharing their own stories of family abuse against the elderly. "You've become a symbol, Eleanor," Margaret said, holding my hand warmly. "A symbol of dignity and setting clear boundaries." That afternoon, Gregory arrived with a detailed report on the immediate consequences. The ballroom had filed a lawsuit against Michael and Brittany for the full value of the event. All their credit cards had been blocked for non-payment. The landlord of their apartment had served them an eviction notice with a 30-day deadline. "They're desperate," Gregory explained as we reviewed the documents. Michael tried to get loans from 3 different banks, all denied due to his credit history. Brittany called 4 modeling agencies looking for work, without success. A part of me felt a deep pain imagining my son facing such hardship. Another, more rational part, understood that this was the first time he was experiencing the real consequences of his choices. "And where are they living now?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "With Brittany's parents," Gregory confirmed. "A 2-bedroom apartment where her parents and teenage sister already lived. The situation is tense, from what I could gather." That evening, the first attempt at direct contact came. Not a call or a message, but a visit. It was almost 9 o'clock when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Michael, alone, his head bowed, looking much smaller than his usual 6'1" frame. For a moment, I considered not answering, but I realized this confrontation was both inevitable and necessary. "Mom," he said when I opened the door, his voice a hoarse whisper, "Can I come in, please?" I allowed him entry, but kept the living room door open, a clear sign that this would not be a long visit. Michael remained standing, looking around as if seeing the apartment for the first time. His eyes scanned the bookshelves Edward and I had collected over decades, the few but well-chosen art pieces, the family photographs, including several of himself over the years. "Why?" was all he could say after a long silence. "That question should be mine, Michael," I replied calmly. "Why did you let things get to this point? Why did you align yourself with someone willing to publicly humiliate me to take what is mine?" He collapsed onto the sofa, covering his face with his hands. "You don't understand, Mom. The debt, the pressure. Brittany was so sure you'd be happy to help us, that it would be better for you to live somewhere smaller, safer. And at no point did it occur to either of you to ask me what I wanted. At no point did you think that maybe, just maybe, I had a right to decide about my own life. You hid everything from me." He suddenly burst out, the frustration finally emerging. "All that wealth, all those properties. Why live like a middle-class person when you could have had everything?" There it was, finally, the true root of the problem. It wasn't about my well-being. It was about what my money could have provided for him. Your father and I made a conscious choice, Michael. We decided that values were more important than possessions. That discretion brought more security than ostentation. And most importantly, we decided that you should learn the value of hard work, not grow up dependent on inherited wealth. And look what happened, he muttered bitterly. "I'm broke, about to be evicted, facing a lawsuit, and living with my in-laws who now blame me for this whole mess. And what did you expect me to do now, Michael? Write a check to cover your debts? Pretend the slap your wife gave me in front of over 100 people never happened? Ignore the months of psychological manipulation? He didn't answer, but his silence was telling. Where is Brittany right now? I asked. His face contorted into an expression that mixed shame and anger. She said she couldn't face you without losing it. She still thinks this is all some big misunderstanding, that you're going to come to your senses. I nodded slowly, absorbing the depth of their denial. And you, Michael, what do you think? He looked up, his red-rimmed eyes meeting mine. I don't know what to think anymore, Mom. Everything I thought I knew about my life fell apart in one night. Welcome to the club, I replied without malice. That's exactly how I felt when I discovered my only son was plotting to strip me of my home. A heavy silence fell between us. For a few minutes, only the ticking of the old grandfather clock, my father's heirloom, filled the room. What happens now? He finally asked, his voice as small as when he was a boy asking about the monster in his closet. That depends entirely on you and Brittany, I answered. I have the means to solve all of your financial problems with a single phone call. But I will not do it as long as there is no genuine acknowledgement of what you did and a real change in behavior. Michael nodded slowly, absorbing the full meaning of my words. It wasn't a definitive no. It was a not right now, a door left ajar for redemption, but one that would require genuine work from them. When he stood to leave, he looked 10 years older than when he arrived. At the door, he turned one last time. Did Dad know? About all the money, the properties? Your father and I built everything together, Michael. It was a mutual decision to live the way we did. He shook his head slowly. All these years, I could have just asked. I could have just talked to you. Yes, I replied simply. You could have. After he left, I sat on the balcony, watching the city lights. The night was exceptionally clear, the stars visible despite the urban light pollution. I thought of Edward, of how he would have handled this situation, probably with more firmness than I had, with less room for redemption. The following week, news continued to trickle in through Gregory and my small network of informants. Michael had gotten a temp job at an electronics store, something far below his qualifications, but the only place willing to hire him with his ruined credit. Brittany was selling her designer bags and shoes on second-hand websites to help cover basic expenses. The video of the wedding confrontation had gone viral enough to attract media attention. I received 3 invitations for interviews on television talk shows, all of which I declined. I didn't want to turn our family tragedy into a public spectacle. However, something unexpected arose from this unplanned exposure. I began receiving emails and letters from people in similar situations, elderly parents being pressured by relatives, parents being manipulated by adult children, grandparents being threatened with not seeing their grandchildren if they didn't provide financial support. Stories that echoed my own, but which rarely found a satisfactory resolution. It was Arthur, my old lawyer friend, who presented the idea during one of our monthly lunches. Eleanor, these people need help, legal counsel, emotional support, someone who understands what they're going through. You have the resources, and now, unfortunately, you also have the experience. The seed was planted. In the following weeks, as Michael and Brittany continued their struggle to survive without my safety net, I began to outline the plans for what would become the Covington Foundation for the Protection of Dignity in Old Age. 3 months after the wedding incident, I received the news I had secretly been expecting but dared not anticipate. Brittany had left Michael, taking with her the few valuable possessions they still had. Apparently, a life of financial hardship was not what she had envisioned for her happily ever after. Michael appeared at my door that same night, soaked by a torrential downpour, carrying only a backpack with his basic clothes. "She's gone," was all he said when I opened the door. I let him in, offered him a towel and dry clothes. I still kept some of his clothes from when he lived with me. I made hot tea while he changed, and when he returned to the living room, he found not only the steaming mug, but also an envelope on the table. "What's this?" he asked, his eyes swollen from crying. "A second chance," I replied, "but with conditions." Inside the envelope was a job offer in the management of one of my commercial buildings, a real job, with real responsibilities and a fair salary, neither too generous nor insufficient. There was also the key to a small apartment in one of my properties, modest but dignified. "Why?" he asked, repeating the same question from our last conversation, but now with a completely different tone. "Because you are my son," I answered simply, "and because I believe people can learn from their mistakes if they are given the chance." That night Michael slept in his old room, and I in my bed, both under the same roof for the first time in years. The future was still uncertain. Trust still needed to be rebuilt, but a first step had been taken. A week later, the Covington Foundation opened its doors. With the help of Gregory, Arthur, and a team of dedicated professionals, we began offering legal assistance, psychological support, and financial guidance to elderly individuals in situations of family vulnerability. The irony was not lost on me. The same fortune my son had tried to take was now being used to help others in a situation similar to my own. The same pain that nearly destroyed my family was being transformed into a source of strength for strangers facing similar battles. Michael started his new job, demonstrating a dedication that positively surprised me. In the first few months, we rarely spoke of the past, focusing on establishing a new routine, a new foundation for our relationship. The first time he mentioned Brittany was almost 6 months after she left. "She called me yesterday," he said during one of our weekly dinners. "She's living with some businessman in Miami. She wanted to know if I had managed to work things out with you, if I had access to your money now." I watched his face as he spoke, searching for signs of nostalgia or regret. I found none. "And what did you tell her?" I asked gently. A small smile formed on his lips. "I told her I was working hard at a real job, living in an apartment I can afford, and building a relationship based on respect with my mother. And that, no, I don't have access to your money. I have something much more valuable." That night, as I logged the Foundation's daily activities in my journal, I reflected on the journey of the last few months. The slap Brittany had given me had been painful, humiliating, and cruel. But it had also been the catalyst for a profound transformation, not only in my life but potentially in the lives of hundreds of other people through the work of the Foundation. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Gregory. "Mrs. Covington, we've just received an interesting notification. Brittany has filed a lawsuit against you, alleging alienation of affection and demanding financial compensation for the end of her marriage." I couldn't help but let out a disbelieving laugh. "She really learned nothing, did she?" "Apparently not," Gregory replied, his professional tone tinged with slight amusement. "But don't worry, this case has no legal merit. It will be dismissed at the first hearing." I thanked him and hung up, feeling a strange peace. Brittany's persistence in her greed only confirmed that my decision on that night in the ballroom had been not only necessary but long overdue. The next day, while leading a guidance session for a group of new Foundation clients, a 75-year-old woman took my hand tightly. "Thank you for showing us that it's never too late to set boundaries," she said with tears in her eyes. "You gave me the courage to say no, for the first time in decades." It was in that moment that I fully understood. The slap I received hadn't been an ending, but a beginning. The start of a new chapter, not just for me, but for all those who found in my story the strength to rewrite their own. A year had passed since that fateful night. Autumn was painting the city in shades of gold and red as I walked through the park near my apartment, reflecting on the transformations of the last 12 months. The Covington Foundation had grown beyond my most optimistic expectations. With 3 regional offices and a team of 20 dedicated professionals, we had already helped over 300 seniors regain their autonomy, dignity, and, in many cases, their assets. The model we created was being replicated in 3 neighboring countries, and a federal law, inspired by our work informally called Eleanor's Law, was establishing more robust protections against the financial manipulation of the elderly. Michael had grown in ways that filled me with a cautious pride. From managing a single building, he now oversaw the entire real estate division of my company, demonstrating a work ethic and integrity that reminded me of his father. He had met Elena, a lawyer from the Foundation, and after 2 years of dating, they married in a simple ceremony in the garden of my country house, an event as different from that first disastrous wedding as one could imagine. As for Brittany, news arrived sporadically. After 4 failed relationships with wealthy men, she finally found an elderly millionaire willing to marry her. Rumors suggested she was already planning her comfortable widowhood, a thought that made me feel a mixture of pity and relief to be far from that toxicity. Gloria Mendoza, our first high-profile client, became not only a close friend but also a valuable contributor to the foundation. At 87, she now led support groups for seniors who had gone through similar experiences, transforming her own pain into support for others. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reflections. It was Louisa, my assistant at the foundation, arriving earlier than expected to take me to that morning's event. "Happy birthday, Mrs. Covington," she exclaimed, handing me a small package. "Sorry for the early arrival, but the traffic is lighter than we anticipated." "Thank you, my dear," I replied, opening the gift to find a beautiful edition of 100 Years of Solitude, my favorite book. "You remembered?" "How could I forget? You mention it at least once a week," she laughed. "Are you ready for today?" "The press has already started arriving at the auditorium." I nodded, feeling that familiar mix of excitement and apprehension. Today was more than my birthday. It was the official launch of my autobiography, The Silent Legacy: How a Slap Changed My Life and Can Change Yours. The book had been a painful and cathartic process to write, reliving not only the betrayal and confrontation, but also the years of growth that followed. The university auditorium was packed when we arrived. Over 400 people, journalists, supporters, foundation staff, and beneficiaries of our programs awaited the presentation. Backstage, I was greeted by Gregory, now in his late 70s but still impeccably dressed and with the same air of unwavering efficiency. "All preparations are complete," he reported as he led me to the waiting area. "Michael and Elena have arrived. They're in the front row. Gloria is here too, along with 5 of our first clients. And we've received messages of support from 3 senators and the Secretary of Human Rights." "And him?" I asked, my voice betraying a tension I couldn't quite hide. Gregory hesitated for only a second. "Ricardo arrived 10 minutes ago. He's sitting at the back as you requested." I nodded slowly. Ricardo Mendoza, the son who had conspired against Gloria years ago, had gone through his own journey of redemption. After his divorce from his manipulative wife and a period of deep depression, he had sought psychological help and, surprisingly, had contacted the foundation to offer his unique perspective, that of the repentant manipulator. His testimony on how and why seemingly normal people can turn against their own elderly parents had become a valuable tool in our educational programs. His presence today, at Gloria's request, symbolized something important: the possibility of genuine reconciliation, albeit with clear boundaries and realistic expectations. When I walked onto the stage, the applause was deafening. I looked at the faces in the audience, some familiar, others known only by sight, many complete strangers who had been touched by my story in some way. In the front row, Michael smiled nervously, holding Elena's hand. Beside him, Gloria gave a subtle wave, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Good morning, everyone," I began, adjusting the microphone. "Thank you so much for sharing this moment with me. Exactly 5 years ago, I was a different woman. I lived a life of carefully cultivated appearances, hiding not only my financial situation, but also essential parts of who I truly was." I paused, observing the attentive silence that fell over the auditorium. I believed I was protecting my family with my silence, with my artificial modesty. I thought that by hiding my true financial and personal strength, I was creating a safer environment for my son to grow up in. What I didn't realize is that secrets, even those kept with the best intentions, create distance. And in that distance, assumptions, misunderstandings, and eventually, manipulation can flourish. From the audience, I saw Michael briefly lower his gaze. I knew these parts of my narrative were still difficult for him, but it was also part of our pact of honesty not to hide the uncomfortable truths of the past. Many of you already know the story of the slap, that moment when my then daughter-in-law publicly assaulted me during her wedding to my son after I refused to hand over the keys to my apartment. That slap resonated far beyond the momentary physical pain. It was the sound of a mask shattering, of a charade coming to an end. I spent the next 40 minutes sharing not only the events of that night, but the journey that followed, the establishment of the foundation, the hundreds of similar cases we uncovered, the legislative changes we helped promote. I spoke about reconciliation and boundaries, about second chances and natural consequences. I spoke about the delicate balance between family love and self-love. This book, I said, holding up a copy, is not just my personal story. It is a guide for anyone, elderly or not, who finds themselves trapped in relationships where mutual respect has been replaced by manipulation. It is a reminder that it is never too late to reclaim your voice, set healthy boundaries, and demand to be treated with the dignity that every human being deserves. During the question and answer session that followed, a journalist posed the question I knew was coming. Mrs. Covington, after everything you've been through, after the success of the foundation and now this book, is there anything you would do differently if you could go back in time? The question hung in the air as I carefully considered my answer. Yes, I replied finally. I would have been honest sooner. Not just about my financial situation, but about my expectations, my boundaries, my values. I would have understood that true protection doesn't come from hiding who you are, but from living authentically and teaching others to respect that authenticity. After the event, during the reception, Michael approached me as I was signing copies. "That was incredible, Mom," he said, the emotion clear in his voice. "But it must have been hard to relive all of that so publicly." "Shame thrives in silence, son," I replied, holding his hand briefly. "Telling our story takes away its power to hurt us." He nodded thoughtfully. "Elena and I have some news," he said after a pause. "We wanted to wait until after the event to tell you." I looked at him, noticing the special glint in his eyes. "We're going to have a baby," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "You're going to be a grandmother in November." The news hit me like a wave of pure emotion. After so many years of distance, pain, and slow rebuilding, this was a powerful symbol of continuity, of a new beginning. "A grandchild," I murmured, the tears finally overcoming my carefully maintained composure. Edward would be so happy. As we hugged, I noticed Gloria watching us from a distance, a knowing smile on her face. Beside her, maintaining a respectful distance, stood Ricardo. His gaze met mine for a moment, and something silent passed between us, a shared acknowledgement of how much work, how much pain, and how much courage it takes to rebuild what was broken. Later that night, after all the guests had gone and I was finally alone in my apartment, the very one I almost lost to the greed of others, I sat on the balcony, contemplating the city lights. I opened the book I had just launched, flipping to the dedication page. For Edward, who taught me the value of true modesty. For Michael, who taught me that people can change. For Brittany, who inadvertently taught me the strength that comes from setting boundaries. And for all those who are still fighting to find their voice, it is never too late to start using it. As I closed the book, I felt a sense of closure that had eluded me for years. Brittany's slap, that moment of public humiliation, had actually been the first step on a journey of liberation. Sometimes, something has to break completely to be rebuilt in a truer, stronger form. At 72 years old, I had learned that a true legacy isn't in the properties we accumulate or even in the relationships we nurture, but in the courage to live authentically, to set healthy boundaries, and to transform our personal pain into a greater purpose. On the table beside me, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from an 84-year-old woman in a distant city. "I just bought your book. I've never told anyone that my son and daughter-in-law have been pressuring me to sell my house. Tomorrow, I'm making an appointment with a lawyer. Thank you for giving me courage." I smiled at the small device that carried such powerful words. Every message like that confirmed that my decision to transform my pain into action had been the right one. The slap Brittany had given me was no longer a painful scar, but a turning point. The moment the old Eleanor died, and a new, stronger, more authentic one began to be born. On the horizon, the first lights of dawn were beginning to appear. A new day, a new beginning, new possibilities. As the city awoke around me, I made a silent promise to myself and to all those our foundation would yet help. The era of silence is over. The era of dignity and truth has just begun. And somewhere, perhaps watching from a place beyond our understanding, I imagined Edward smiling that smile I knew so well. Proud, loving, and above all, free of secrets. Now, if you liked this story, Click on this next video appearing on the screen, because in it, there's a story of betrayal and comeback like you've never seen before.